So recently I watched the latest episode as of writing the script of Sword Art Online Alicization War. I haven't exactly been keeping up with it, at all. I only saw it because Kirito was in the thumbnail and I knew he was in a coma or something. So I thought, you know what, why not check out how he'll return to the battlefield. After I watched it, I saw the reactions from Twitter, and a common thing I kept stumbling was SAO fans stating that the episode pretty much debunked the idea that Kirito is a Gary Stu. Now, I'm not really gonna get into why they're saying this, at least not for now, because what I actually want to discuss is why the Gary Stu label was placed at him in the first place. The reason why I say this is because I've always found the way people often use the terms Mary Sue and Gary Stu rather odd, and it makes me wonder if we should continue to use them as loosely as we do. So my basis for this has to do with the very origin of the term Mary Sue. It was first coined in a parody story referring to a character of the same name who was meant to be a satire of Star Trek fanfic characters who were pretty obviously designed to be wish fulfillment or proxies for the author, and there were some glaring contrivances that derived from it, mainly to do with how their aptitudes and social status dwarfed that of any normally written character in the series, to the point where they come off as unreasonably exceptional. People's main issues with Mary Sue characters have to do with how relatively unearned and unrealistic their achievements are, often described as perfect characters who don't have as much struggles as they deserve. Now, I'd like to keep my opinions on Mary Sue's to myself for now. Instead, what I want to bring attention to is the popularization of the term, which I think led to people kind of overusing it. I've already seen a lot of people debate how overpowered, privileged, and perfect someone is allowed to be before they can be classified as a Mary Sue, but I've noticed people tend to miss one important factor: the wish fulfillment and self-insertion element, particularly in what series they're in. The reason I question why Kirito was being described as a Gary Stu to begin with is because Kirito is the protagonist of an original series. He is overpowered, even reaching absurd levels for the standards of the series, but there are standards specifically created for him to surpass. When you look back at the original usage of Mary Sue, that was meant to describe characters who were defying the balance and rules of an already existing series, since we're talking about fanfiction. Even someone like Rey from Star Wars, which I'm not here to debate whether or not she's a Mary Sue, but I think the application of the term itself is fairly arguable, since she is a character who was introduced in the sequel trilogy, and it draws enough parallels to how you would introduce original characters into fanfiction that I think this criticism can be at least debated. But Kirito doesn't really fit that criteria. Is he a wish fulfillment character? Yes, he is, but even if you wanted to criticize him for that, it doesn't make much sense to correlate his flaws with that of a Mary Sue, since the context for both cases are different. One time I heard someone, it was Jeff, describing Sasuke as a Gary Stu, which baffled me because he's a rival character who's specifically designed for the main character to envy and compete. All of the Gary Stu-ish traits he might have are not necessarily meant to serve as wish fulfillment. They're primarily intended to elicit jealousy and hype for the inevitable confrontation between him and the main character that will be rich in tension as a result of it. Plus, he's not even that socially well adjusted anyway, but that's another debate. And while Kirito might be closer to fitting the description of a Gary Stu, he still doesn't quite yet fit the full criteria because the story is all about exploring the idea of a character who dedicated his time mastering the skills of the virtual game sphere, so much so that he stands above most characters by a milestone, and that has always been the mainframe of the series since the very beginning. So you can't really say he's the equivalent of a late self-insert original character in fanfiction, where their nature as an anomaly extends beyond being exceptional in the story. It's defying the entire paradigm of a whole series that has been built on way before the Mary Sue character was even conceived. Furthermore, wish fulfillment isn't even that much of an uncommon trait in fictional stories. A lot of protagonists, especially in action series and movies, are on some level wish fulfillment characters, where part of their appeal is allowing the audience and probably also the author to indulge in the fantasy of being a badass person. And even then, that wish fulfillment can only go so far. As ideal as it might be to wear Kirito's shoes on a surface level, there are a lot of stuff he goes through that I don't think anyone in the audience would ever want to experience, like seeing his comrades die, watching his girlfriend get raped, going through post-traumatic stress disorder, literally being paralyzed. Of course, this is something that varies from character to character, and there are many ways authors can decide to frame characters that might not be designed for the purpose of being viewed as wish fulfillment or the exact opposite. But the point is, it's not a black and white issue where it's one way or the other. Fictional characters are a lot more complicated in terms of what set of emotions they're meant to convey to the viewers. And so with that, I think the usage of the terms Mary Sue and Gary Stu should be more specific. I think it's fine to discuss whether or not you dislike a character for how perfect and contrived he or she is. I just think that we should reserve Mary Sue's for more special cases. Anyway, that's all.